What's up, everyone? This is Elliott Connie, and for over 15 years, I've helped tens of thousands of counselors support their clients in finding solutions in their everyday lives, and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own. And today I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my life and in my work to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I want to talk to you about one of my personal heroes, and that is Dr. Martin Luther King. Today, here in America, we celebrate the life and accomplishments of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I can't help but think about the personal impact that he has had on my life. Growing up, there were two kind of civil rights leaders globally that inspired me, even as a young person. Just like something about these men, their lives, and hearing the way they lived their lives really inspired me and really touched me. And those two men are Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. And I've had the blessed opportunity to travel to South Africa and visit remarkable places that are relevant to the life of Nelson Mandela. Like I've been to his home, I've been to the two places where he spent most of his prison time, Robben Island and Pollsmoor Prison. I've also had some amazing opportunities to visit some things related to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And one story inspires me more than any other. So Adam Frower and I went on a trip to Selma, Alabama. And while we were there, it's hard to explain, but a bunch of things happened while we were in Selma, Alabama. And we met a woman who owned the house that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used as his headquarters for the march from Selma to Montgomery about voters' rights. And you guys might have seen this house. It's in the movie Selma. And they use a replica. I now know they use a replica, but the actual house, Adam and I got a tour inside the actual house. And it's amazing. They haven't touched it since the 1960s. Like it still looks the same way it looked when Dr. Martin Luther King was there. The bedroom that he slept in, his clothes are still in the closet, the kitchen table where he ate his meals, the television that he watched when he was watching the news about the Voters' Rights Act, the phone where he took a phone call from President Lyndon B. Johnson. It is all still there. It's not open for public viewing, but somehow we met the person who owned the house and we got a tour of inside this house, and it was amazing, actually. And one thing that stood out about this tour, one of the things that we saw was a bucket. And Adam asked, what was that bucket? Now, we had seen all of these things, his clothes, his pajamas, his bed, this phone. We'd seen all of this stuff. But then there's this like silvery, rusty bucket next to a chair. Adam notices the bucket and he says, "What's this bucket?" And the person who owned the house, who was the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King's friend, she refers to him as Uncle Martin, and she has a bunch of things that he signed Uncle Martin to her, explains that this bucket is where he washed the feet of the people closest to him that were going to be leading this march. He said, we're going to be walking on sacred ground. We have to have clean feet. And Martin Luther King Jr. himself washed the feet of the people that are going to be leading this march with him. And that was such an amazingly touching thing. I mean, here's this guy, this leader of the civil rights movement, this global icon, all of these things. And he got down on his knees and he washed the feet of the people that were going to be marching with him. That was one of the most touching things that I learned. You can't learn that in a textbook. I never heard that story and certainly never seen that bucket. And there's a picture that she has of MLK washing the feet of his partners, of his associates. And I think that to me captures the humility of the man. The march captures the power of the man, but the bucket captures the humility of the man. I think being able to stand up for civil rights and being able to stand up for the rights of people who are being oppressed and marginalized is one of the most amazing things we can do with our time here on earth. And I want all of you who can hear my voice to take an example from Martin Luther King Jr. and be brave enough to stand up when you think people need standing up. The world we live in has gotten crazy, and I think it's never been more necessary than to stand up for people in this day and age, so that we can all have equality, so we can all have rights, and we can truly manifest the dream that Martin Luther King Jr. had all those years ago. Thank you so much for being here today. Please do me a huge favor and share this podcast with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. I think on MLK's day, on the day we commemorate his birthday, I'd really love it if you could share this message. So thank you. And please don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts where you can subscribe, rate this podcast, leave feedback, and in fact, do that wherever you listen to your podcast. And I will see you tomorrow. What's up, everyone? This is Elliott Connie, and for over 15 years, I've helped thousands of counselors support their clients in finding solutions in their everyday lives, and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own. And today I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I want to talk about standing up for yourself. And I'm going to be really clear, so I'm going to share some things that have been challenging for me over the years. Because, I'll be honest, like these days, I consider myself a strong man. I consider myself a strong person. I consider myself capable of standing up for myself, my family, those that I love. I consider myself capable of fighting back and pushing back against anyone who tries to, oppress me or hold me down or all of those things. But it didn't start that way. I remember when I was a kid, growing up in middle school, one of the huge things that we had in our area was we had dances. And it would be a time where you go to this hall and everybody from the school goes and you get to hang out with your friends and try to dance with that girl you have a crush on. And the slow song dance where like your hand is on her hips, fully extended, your arms are fully extended and her hands are on your shoulders, arm fully extended, just sway back and forth like a typical 1980s middle school dance. And one day I rode my bike to this middle school dance. And there was this bully, and he never really bullied me, but he was known as a bully in the school. And as I was walking into the dance, I saw him throwing my bike against the wall. Like he was literally like destroying my bike. And I was probably 12 years old, maybe. And I didn't have the backbone or strength or whatever you want to call it to like ask him to stop. And I kind of just pretended it wasn't happening. I went into the dance and just kind of pretended like it wasn't happening because I was afraid and I was scared. I just, growing up in the environment in which I grew up, like it doesn't breed confidence. And I didn't have the stuff inside needed to stand up for myself and ask this boy to stop destroying my bike. He eventually destroyed the bike, made it unrideable, had to throw it away. My parents asked me what happened to my bike and I said I got into an accident. And they bought me a new bike a few months later. It wasn't an expensive bike. My family didn't have a bunch of money, but that experience, I think, kind of it explains what my confidence level was like as a child. And in order to stand up for yourself, you have to have an internal confidence. You have to have a self-resolution that I will not allow people to violate me. I will not allow people to violate my loved ones. I will not allow people to do things that offend me, oppress me, hold me down, insult me. And I did not have that as a young person. That was just not part of my makeup as a young person. And that was probably one of the most embarrassing experiences from my life with my lack of ability to stand up for myself. But I want to tell you about the proudest moment. And my father was a very angry, upset, difficult man. And one day when I was 19 years old, he had come to visit where I was living at the time in Texas. And me and my two brothers and my father went to go see a movie. And walking out of the movie theater, my older brother and my father got into an argument and it turned into a pushing and shoving match, which was not uncommon. But at that time in my life, I was going through so much and I was so pleased that I had a life. There was no anger hitting. I had moved to Texas to escape all that. And now all of that had come to Texas. And I was so upset. And I broke up their argument. I broke up the pushing match. And when they got in my car, my father slammed my car door. And for whatever reason, for the first time in my life, I stood up. I stood up for myself. I stood up to him. And I turned to him and I said, I need you to close my door like you respect me. And my father looked at me with shock in his eyes. And I said, I'm serious. I'm not moving this car until you open the door and then close it gently like you respect me. And my father got upset. He got out of the car and he walked about 2 miles to his hotel. And that was the last night that my father and I spoke. We haven't spoken since then. Later on, I called him and I said, I want you to be a part of my life, but only if you cannot curse at me, call me names, or yell at me. My father swore at me. He said, F you, said I can't do that, and has chosen not to be a part of my life since. But I still recognize that as a powerful moment of me standing up, because that's when I learned how to stand up for myself. That's when I learned the importance of standing up for myself. And I think that's when I became the person that could defend himself and defend his mental health, defend what I knew was right. I think that's an important lesson to share with people. So I want you guys to think about, when did you learn to stand up for yourself? I want everybody listening to think, how did you learn to stand up for yourself, and what steps did you take to be able to do that? So thanks so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind doing me a huge favor, please share this podcast with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And please don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to this podcast, where you can rate and leave feedback on this podcast. In fact, do that wherever you consume your podcast, and I will see you tomorrow. What's up, everyone? This is Elliott Connie, and for over 15 years, I've helped tens of thousands of counselors support their clients in finding solutions in their everyday lives, and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own. And today I want to welcome you back to the aha moments, where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I want to talk to you a little bit more about standing up for yourself, and about boundary setting, and about how to enforce those boundaries. The funny thing is, whenever you set a boundary and you stand up for yourself, usually the first thing that happens is the person you are setting that boundary towards, they test the boundary. They don't respect it. Right? That's usually the first thing that happens. So I'm going to give you an example. I talk a lot about my childhood and the impact my father's treatment of me had on my life and on my childhood, and the abusive nature of that relationship. Well, when I turned about 19 years old, I had it. And I told my father, there was an incident that happened, and I told my father that I need to have a life where I'm not being yelled at, I'm not being called names, and I'm not being punched. And unless you can participate in a relationship with me where those 3 rules are followed, I'm not going to continue to be in this relationship. I told my father, I will not continue to talk to you unless you can follow those rules. And he responded to me by saying, F you, which was a demonstration to me that he could not follow those rules. And then I had to go about enforcing them, and I had to stick to exactly what it is that I said. Boundaries are not about like you manipulating someone or you making someone behave the way you want them to behave. Boundaries are about you putting in place rules that allow you to live the life you want to live. And I didn't want to live a life where I was being called names. I didn't want to live a life where I was being yelled at. I didn't want to live a life where I was being punched. And anyone who was doing those things, I had to remove from my life. Didn't matter who they were. It didn't matter what was going on. I wanted a life where I was not under threat in those ways, and I had to enforce those boundaries. And like I said, the most common thing is people don't just respect the boundaries, they test you. And over the first few years, it was really hard. And my father would try to re-enter my life. He would test the boundaries by breaking one of those 3 rules. And then I had to reinforce it. I had to say, then this is what's going to happen. To this very day, he's never been able to say to me or demonstrate to me that he can follow those rules. And I've had to live a life without close contact with him. And that's okay, because I've successfully lived a life where no one puts me under threat in the 3 ways that are relevant to those rules. So how do you do that? The first thing you have to do is be able to decide what type of life I want to live, and what things I want in and what things I do not want in. The second thing is you have to be able to decide that I am worthy of having that life. And then the third thing you have to do is allow people in who follow those rules and make you feel good, and remove people who don't follow those rules and don't make you feel good. Oftentimes, people come into therapy and their lives are upset, and their lives are disrupted, and there are problems going on in their lives. But one of the most contributing factors to people having unhappy lives and having challenging lives is people are in their lives that are making them unhappy. People are in their lives that are making them feel violated. People are in their lives that are breaking their rules. But most commonly, most people haven't even thought about what they want their rules to be. Most people haven't even thought about the type of life they want to live. Most people haven't even thought about what I want in and what I don't want in my life. And one of the most neglectful things you can do is not recognize that you are a person. You have values, you have strengths. There is amazingness within you, and you deserve to live a life that is fulfilling. You deserve to live a life that is happy. You deserve to live a life where people are not violating the fundamental things that lead your life. I know I deserve a life where no one is hitting me, where no one is calling me names, and no one is yelling at me. I know I deserve that life, and it's up to me to ensure that I have it. I want you to think about the type of life you want to lead. I want you to think about the type of foundational things you want in your life and out of your life, and what boundaries you need to set up that allow the things you want in to flow in and allow the things you want out to stay locked out. Hey, thanks so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind, please do me a super huge favor and share this podcast with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. And don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to this podcast, where you can rate this podcast, leave feedback for this podcast. In fact, do those things wherever you listen to your podcast, and I will see you tomorrow. What's up, everyone? This is Elliott Connie, and for over 15 years, I've helped tens of thousands of counselors support their clients in finding solutions for their everyday lives, and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own. And today, I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today, I want to continue talking about standing up, but talk about it in the context of the social environment in which we live. And in order to do this, I have to shout out my best friend, Adam Frower, because we live in a society of internet bullying, oppression, racism, like lots of hate going on in the world that impacts us. Like, my own experience in this field has been one littered with racial attacks and people coming after me for things that are just racially motivated. You know, throughout the history of my career at writing books and gaining prominence, it's been a wonderful thing and it's been a lot of fun, but it has come with consequences where people who were benefiting from the status quo decided to attack me and try to ruin or even end my career. When I think about standing up for issues and standing up for justice and standing up in the environment that we live in, I have to think about Adam Frower, who is my very best friend and my colleague and my peer. But on some level, he was my savior a bit, because while all of this was going on, he would make it very overt that he thought bigoted bullying was inappropriate. And he would contact the people and the organizations that were doing this and tell them that he thought what they were doing was wrong. In some cases, he was a member of these organizations and he was a part of these boards and he was a part of what was going on in the community, and he would resign from those positions. And that is what true allyship looks like. And that is what true standing up looks like, is when you see something wrong, you stand up against it, even at the threat of consequence. One time we were in Canada, and Adam had recently made a proclamation that he thought the way one of these organizations was functioning was wrong and inappropriate. And we were in Canada at a conference, and the president of that organization pulled Adam aside and said, "You should be very careful who you're associating with. People are noticing that you're aligning yourself with Elliott, and there are people saying things in unkind ways. And if you continue to align yourself with Elliott, you may start experiencing some professional consequences." And she was saying that to him from a very significant position of status and power in our field. She's the president of a major association, and saying to Adam, if you continue doing the things you're doing, you will experience consequences, like almost like a threat to get him to stop doing what he was doing. And of course he did not. In fact, it just hardened his resolve. It just hardened our alignment and even more assuredly guaranteed that we would continue working together because we wanted to affect change in our field. We wanted to affect change in our community. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of all the things I've accomplished, like I've traveled the world, I've written books, I've all kinds of crazy things. But I think the thing I'm most proud of is that Adam and I have gone on to completely change this field. That organization eventually had to create a diversity committee. That organization now has 3 people of color that sit on the board. That person who said that is no longer the president. And that's because a Black man has become the loudest voice and the leader of this field. And they had to address the diversity issues that were present in the field. They had to address their previous conduct that was going on in this field. They had to address their wrongs. But that doesn't happen if you don't stand up to what you see happening as wrong. That doesn't happen if you don't stand up with a bit of resolve and determine that you're just going to create change, even if it comes with the potentiality of consequences. I'm forever grateful for the fact that Adam Frower stood by my side when he saw things happening that were wrong. And I think that's what we need more in this society. Society's gone in a way that everyone has a voice. And sometimes those voices are expressed in wonderful ways on social media and sometimes not. And sometimes we have to stand up for what's right and try to create a community where there's love and acceptance. And we have to stand up to bullies when we see it happening. So I want you guys to take this opportunity to look around your life and see what injustices can you stand up for, what rightness can you stand up for, what wrongs can you correct to try to make this world a more accepting, loving, kind world for us to live in. So thanks so much for being here today. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Do me a super huge favor and share this podcast with at least one person you think could benefit from hearing this message. And don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts where you can rate this podcast, leave feedback, and subscribe. And do that wherever you listen to your podcast. And I will see you tomorrow. What's up, everyone? This is Elliott Connie. And for over 15 years, I've helped tens of thousands of counselors support their clients in finding solutions in their everyday lives and worked with tens of thousands of clients on my own. And today I want to welcome you back to the aha moments where every day I share the lessons I've learned in my work and in my life to inspire you to live your very best life. And today I want to talk to you about standing up and standing up in a societal way and using your privilege and your power and your voice to truly make a difference. So first, let's talk about privilege for a second. Let's talk about what privilege is. A lot of people didn't hear about privilege and, unconscious bias and stuff like that until, the last few years. But as an African American, privilege has been a part of my life for the entirety of my life. And let me give you an example of what I mean when I say privilege. So privilege is when you have a trait, oftentimes a trait that you did not earn, like your race or your gender. For example, I'm a male, I have male privilege. That trait allows people to make certain positive assumptions about you. So as a male, there are certain privileges afforded to me, like people assume that I'm stronger than a female when that may not always be the case. Like I have the ability to be more assertive because people will view me as like, that's a good, strong man. Where if a woman does the exact same assertive behavior, they will label her in a very negative way. So that's privilege. And we have to accept that some people have unearned privilege and some people have different levels of privilege and other people do not. Other people actually have the opposite of privilege when people look at them because of their traits, because of their unearned traits, and assume the worst about them and assume negative things about them. One really good example is one time I was at a conference with a good friend of mine named Adam. I've talked about Adam a lot in this podcast and on lots of my videos and training material. We were both wearing workout clothes and we were walking through the hotel lobby about 10 feet away from each other, going to the gym, the fitness center at this hotel. And someone looked at Adam and said, "Oh, you look like you're working out." And he's like, "Yep, I'm going to the fitness center." And then when I walked by a few minutes later, they said, "Why are you dressed like a thug?" And we were wearing the exact same thing. We were both wearing a t-shirt and shorts and sneakers. But with Adam, who is a white male, they made one level of assumption, like, oh, he looks like he's going to work out. But with Elliott, who's a black male, they made a negative assumption, like he looks like he is dressed down or looks like a thug. They actually use that word. We have to accept that some people live in a different world than we do because of the assumptions people make about the traits that they carry that they can't change. Like, I can't do anything about being Black. These are traits that I can't change. And we need to use the power of our voices. We need to use the power of our privilege to increase other people's opportunity to have equity. When we see wrongdoings happen, we have to make it the norm that we stand up and allow our privilege to help other people. And an example of that is I was driving in Mississippi with my friend Adam, and some really horrible things that happened in the news for Black motorists in this area of Mississippi. And Adam was thinking, we were having overt conversations about this, like, if we get pulled over, Adam was thinking, like, I won't be able to stay silent if they violate Elliott's rights. So how can I use my privilege to help him get out of a dangerous situation if someone chooses to treat him poorly? And I want that to become the norm. Too often we are silent when we see something happen that is just not right. When we see other people's violations of their civil rights, very often we are silent because these are uncomfortable conversations to have. They're uncomfortable topics to broach. They're uncomfortable things to cover. But we have to decide that we're going to stand up when we see wrong things happen. We're going to stand up and not let anybody be mistreated because of traits that they carry that are not traits that they can change. I want all of you to just think really hard about the levels of privilege that you all carry, because most of us have some level of privilege, even if in another area of your life you don't. Like, as a Black male, oftentimes privilege works against me, but as a male, I do have certain privileges that women aren't afforded. And it's important that we acknowledge that truth, and it's important that we use the strength of our voices to level the playing field and allow everybody to have equity. Privilege in and of itself is not a bad thing, but the fact that we don't allow everybody to have it is the problem. So look for opportunities where you can allow other people to share an equitable existence here on this planet. Thanks so much for being here today, and please share this podcast with at least one person that you think could benefit from hearing this message today. It would mean the world to me. And don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and leave feedback for this podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast. In fact, rate, subscribe, and leave feedback wherever you listen to your podcast. And I will see you on Monday.